When they saw this, they made known what had been told to them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts always be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. Well, the stories that we hear every year through Advent and now in the Christmas season and then in Epiphany, we actually forget they're supposed to shock and amaze and surprise us. We have turned these stories into something that we think is business as usual, as though the things that happen in these stories are normal. In fact, we just spent our last Sunday talking about how abnormal it is the way that Joseph behaves when he finds out that he is engaged to a woman who's pregnant with a child who's not his own. In fact, there are several moments in the story in Matthew and then also in Luke where things could go sideways. And actually, two angels have to show up in those stories to calm people down, which actually is also unexpected because when angels show up in stories like they do in the one tonight, people don't normally calm down. They normally freak out. And so we have angels doing what's not expected. We have a righteous man doing what's not expected. In a couple of weeks, we're going to hear a story about 3 pagan religious leaders who follow a star doing astrology, and they find the Lord of creation, and they find him by going and meeting a megalomaniacal king, and then stumping some biblical scholars. And then finally, everybody's got to have a vision again to get things back on the right path. These are not stories that are usual, and one of the great heresies of American Christianity is that we tell these stories as if this is the way things should happen, or they do happen. And this is the whole point of them, is this is the way things don't happen. And one of those details that is this way, so much so, that is very perplexing to me, is that the first people that the King of the universe's birth is foretold to are a bunch of shepherds. And I'm telling you, even though you've heard this story a bunch, and you think that's the way the story's supposed to go, if you were writing this story from scratch, they're not even in the top 10 people groups that you would choose to tell this to. I want you to think, if you had a really juicy piece of information, if you had a piece of information that was going to change society around you, who would you tell? I'm telling you, you cheat because you know the story, but it wouldn't be shepherds. You wouldn't tell the shepherds, even if you liked shepherds, even if you were a shepherd, you wouldn't tell them. And the reason is they don't live around people. They got nobody to talk to. They just talk to sheep, right? They got problems. And yet in this story, the very first people to get to hear this tale are a bunch of folks that live out in the countryside, away from most human contact. They probably come in every now and then and get supplies in town. But they're known for what they are, and they don't have a lot of networking capabilities. You wouldn't tell them that. Now, I will admit, in fact, I know there are probably some very good Sunday school students and people that have heard Christmas sermons before that will tell you there is a good reason that shepherds appear in the story. And it's a symbolic one. In fact, ever since people could paint on cave walls, or they could take reeds and press them into wet clay tablets, or they could take dyes and paint them onto scraped and dried animal hides, the shepherd is the symbol of the king. It's always been that way for thousands and thousands of years. Every kind of document that we have always talks about kings as being shepherds. And so in that way, it does make sense that the shepherds would make a symbolic appearance in a story about a king. What I find unexpected and surprising is that the shepherds are the main characters in Act 2 of this story of the birth of Jesus. In fact, all of the action revolves around them, and hardly any of the action, actually none of it really, revolves around this holy family in a manger that we just followed from Nazareth to Bethlehem. They just get to sit and be still in the story while the shepherds get to do all the good stuff. They have all the action. The angels appear to them. They go on a road trip. It's a short road trip, but it's a road trip nonetheless. Just like any road trip movie, they got to go somewhere, and they get there and they find something, and then they're changed. It's a whole story all in a few verses. They're changed by what they find. It's not the end of the road because they keep traveling. And then they tell people what happened to them. It's surprising to me that shepherds, the ones that should be the symbol, I mean, it would make sense to maybe put one in the stable with them. I mean, shepherds are with animals. But to let them do all the acting seems to be a little out of the ordinary. But there's something even deeper, and maybe it's subtle, but it is a thing about this story that surprises me even more. And of course, the shepherds do get this announcement from the angel, and they are committed to go into town and to see this child. But when they get there, that child doesn't do anything for them. And yet when they leave, they are transformed, and they want to tell everybody about this baby. Now, sometimes we are transformed by meeting babies, but they're not usually ones from strangers. I can tell you that the most, transformative moment in my life, or one of them, was the birth of our first child. In fact, it reordered my universe in a way I couldn't even begin to tell you. But I also can tell you, I met a co-worker's baby for the first time 2 weeks ago, and you know what it did to my world? Nothing. All right? So these shepherds go in and they meet a child that they have no connection to. Now, they've had a supernatural announcement about it. But just meeting that baby is enough to make them go and tell everybody that they met that baby. In fact, I probably didn't even tell my wife I met this baby 2 weeks ago. I was so underwhelmed by that experience. So when they are changed by a baby in the story that's less than 24 months old. And that baby can't do any of the things that we think need to happen to us for us to be changed. That baby can't teach them anything. That baby can't do a miracle for them. That baby can't perform a ritual for them. That baby can't bless them. It's a baby. And it's less than 24 hours old. And that baby just lies there. And that family just deals with having a newborn child in a manger. And yet, that baby who does no actions whatsoever changes them, transforms them, makes them into people that they were not before, just because they encountered that baby. Now, you know why I believe that we resist that idea in Christendom, that you don't have to have anything happen to you other than meet a baby to be changed, is because the history of portraying the story adds all kinds of things for this baby to do. So it makes sense that they would change. We got this tale about animals that speak at midnight every Christmas Eve. That's because we want that baby to do something. The medieval painters and Renaissance painters are constantly setting up this less than 24-hour-old baby in positions where he can do miracles, where he can teach and bless. And you can see the shepherds come in being taught by him. But that's not what happens in the story for real. And it's because we don't want to just be changed because we meet somebody. We want to be changed because we were convinced. We want to be changed because we saw something so spectacular we could not ignore it any longer. We want to be changed because we went through the right motions to be changed. And that baby can't do that. That baby didn't teach them anything. That baby didn't zap them with some blessing mojo that he could have because he was some kind of superhero baby. I mean, really, all these paintings with the baby's got his fingers like this already. All the babies can do is like this, and then they can put it in their mouth. That's about it they can do with their hands. We resist the idea that we can be changed just by an encounter alone. But of course, there is something that is not very normal about the story. And that not very normal thing is that the maker of the universe makes himself a thing. And that thing happens to be a baby. And that thing is a localized presence of God. And that's what changes those shepherds. Not some teaching, not some miracle, not some magic, not some blessing, but just the encounter with the presence of God. Now, what I find even more astounding than all of that is that there's a part of this story that is not done that you and I have been invited into. You and I have been invited the way the shepherds are, and maybe you were called by some sign once upon a time, or maybe you had a vision, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Maybe you married into a family that worshipped, and you went one time and said, I could get behind this. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you feel like you've never had that encounter, but I'm telling you, tonight you get to hear the story, and you get to have a meeting with the presence of God in this place, because there are 2 or 3 of us gathered here. Because the message of Christmas is really this, when it comes down to it. God's presence can be anywhere. And God proves this to us by making God's presence in a baby, in a manger. Making God's presence to us a man who is fasting in a wilderness. Making God present to us at tables with Pharisees, at tables with sinners. But most of all, that God makes himself present in a dying man's body on a cross. And if God can be present in all those places, he can be present right here now with the most unlikely of characters who have been invited into that story, you and I. God can be here, and God is here. And it is that encounter alone that can send us out, being made into new people. So why shepherds? I think because somehow God knew that if he told shepherds first, they would do what they were told and tell other people. It might be that somebody would have been better connected to tell the story, but maybe they wouldn't have had the will to do so. Maybe they wouldn't have had the amazement to do so. And why tell us this story? I think it's for the same reason, so that we can tell others and make God present to them. Because the story doesn't end when they get to the manger. The story's not over until they leave. And it is the residual effects of God's presence in the form of that baby in the stable that is on them when they leave and they tell other people that amazes other people too. The story tells us that other people were amazed, and they never made it to the stable, and they never made it to the manger, and they didn't see the angels, and yet they have amazement because there is something about taking that presence with you wherever you go and letting it rub off on other folks. So I hope this Christmas that you encounter the presence of God, whether it's in the stories that we tell from here, whether it's in the fellowship with one another, whether it's in the meal that we share with bread and wine. Those are all things that we do just to make God present here. If it's just in our prayers, I hope that that is the encounter that you have. And I hope that you believe that that is enough to transform you. Not so that you're a better person, but so that you take the presence of God that you find in one of those activities this evening and take it and give it to somebody else. Amen.